Hello, everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. I'm Nick Palavito. I'll be your moderator for today's show. In today's show, we're going to go over medicine and science breaking news because we have a lot of news coming out of Washington and, of course, other science areas. And with that, we have a real medical doctor, person who's board certified in internal medicine, also has specialties in infectious diseases, things that we don't really want. So we don't want these diseases, but we do want Dr. Michael Patmos. So Dr. Michael Patmos will give us an update on what's going on. So Dr. Patmos, got some breaking news in the medical area, so we're going to turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I am indeed a board-certified internal medicine physician with added qualifications in infection control and hospital epidemiology. And infectious diseases are my passion, and I've been blessed with the opportunity to talk about infectious disease related topics and infection control related topics on this podcast, and I really appreciate it. So there is some breaking news today. A memo was just sent out the other day by Kurt Kaschauer, who is an assistant secretary in the Veterans Administration. That memo basically informed all physicians who are working in the VA system. That includes the thousands of resident physicians and fellows. These are doctors who are in advanced levels of training. They rotate through and spend a lot of time at VA hospitals. People may not realize, but VA hospitals are largely staffed by physicians who are residents and fellows in various levels of advanced training. And they often have academic appointments, these residents and fellows, and they're young doctors and looking to climb the ladder in their career. So doing research is a very important activity for these resident physicians and fellow physicians, as well as the other physicians who are employed by the VA. Well, two pulmonary doctors working within the VA published an article, an opinion piece, in the New England Journal of Medicine last week that pointed out that the cuts to the VA system are having a significant detrimental effect on veteran healthcare, particularly for lung disease. Now, anyone who's spent any time working in the VA system knows that veterans have very high rates of chronic obstructive lung disease, chronic bronchitis, and emphysema. Well, these two pulmonologists wrote an article talking about what they have observed in terms of the impact on these patients, published it in the New England Journal, and within days, bingo, out comes a memo from the Assistant Secretary of the VA informing physicians in the Veterans Administration that they may not publish any articles without permission from Mr. Kaschauer's office. So that's a novel thing. Turns out that now if you have a research article or something you're going to publish, say in the New England Journal of Medicine, you can't until you get permission from a VA bureaucrat. This is a real clamping down on the freedom that academic physicians have to publish and share information in leading medical journals. So I think that is significant breaking news. And it follows on what was recently reported in Inside Medicine. Inside Medicine is a Substack that reports regularly on topics inside medicine. And they recently reported just a few days ago data from an organization called GrantWatch. GrantWatch keeps tabs on all the grants that have been funded by the NIH. And here's what GrantWatch found. So far, DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, that claims to have saved so much money in waste, has actually cut grant funding for medical research in the United States by $3.8 billion. You heard that right. DOGE, Elon Musk, and his team of 20-something techies and hackers has cut American research funding by $3.8 billion just since January. And guess which medical school took the biggest hit and lost 340 grants because of this? Harvard Medical School, the same medical school that Donald Trump is on a war with, and the same university that Trump is at war with. So Harvard Medical School is getting slammed. They've lost 340 grants. These are grants where the doctors there at Harvard are engaged in important medical research. But it's interesting. It's not every medical school has taken a hit. Turns out that actually Johns Hopkins had an increase in 44 grants, and Stanford also had an increase. Why is that significant? Well, Dr. Marty Makary, who is the director of the FDA, is a faculty member at Johns Hopkins. He's a surgeon there. He's an anti-vaxxer and a surgeon, not an infectious disease doctor. And Dr. Bhattacharya is on the faculty at Stanford. He's an economist. He's actually not a fully trained physician. He never did any internship, residency, fellowship, has no license, no board certification. But he's an economist at Stanford. And interestingly, Johns Hopkins and Stanford have increased their grants from the NIH, while Harvard has gotten slammed and lost 340 of them. Some of the other research grants that have been cut around the country that are notable, Duke University and Scripps in San Diego have had significant cuts, millions of dollars in cuts to their HIV research activity. Remember HIV? Remember AIDS? Yeah, well, it's not gone. It's still out there. It's now a disease that is controlled, not curable, but can be controlled with medication. You see long-term survivors now, like Magic Johnson has had HIV for over 20 years. He's doing great because he's on meds. If he were to stop his meds, within short time, he would die of AIDS. So it was that kind of research that led to these treatments for HIV. And oh, by the way, Anthony Fauci was the first American scientist to help pioneer the first treatment for HIV, AZT. In any case, that research is now being gutted, especially at Duke, Scripps, and other places. You may have heard that the organization USAID, which is a foreign aid organization that provides money to other countries to help them with largely medical and infectious disease matters, that organization was started by John F. Kennedy, and it has been a global beacon of hope and help from the United States. That organization has been essentially gutted and essentially shuttered by Elon Musk and Doge, and has resulted in the interruption in the delivery of medications for HIV prevention and tuberculosis and malaria and other diseases. So what happens when you stop delivering medications to these parts of the world where they don't have access to medications, and unless the United States supports that delivery, what happens is people die. Just since January, just since Doge and Elon Musk have engaged in this vicious, unconscionable attack on U.S. aid, it has been reliably estimated that over 300,000 people have now died, over 200,000 of whom were children. So this is not just cutting research, it's actually killing people around the world. Now, you might say, well, but that's a foreign country. It's not our concern. We can't be caretakers for the entire world. Well, I can understand what you're saying with that, but bear in mind that with contagious infectious diseases, there is no us and them. It's one big pool. And if you pee at one end of the pool, it's going to spread to the other end of the pool. When you have uncontrolled malaria, TB, HIV, Ebola, whatever virus or bacterial infection might be happening, Mpox, in one part of the world, nowadays with all the travel that we are engaged in, it spreads into the United States very quickly. So U.S. aid isn't just for the benefit of those people over there. It's for our own benefit here in the United States. When you cut U.S. aid, you will see a resurgence globally of deadly, contagious, infectious diseases, and we are already seeing that. So, by the way, CDC funding, as a result of Doge, has been cut in half. What does CDC do? They monitor and surveil all infectious diseases around the world for early identification and early intervention. It was because of CDC that Ebola was recognized in Africa, and it got clamped down upon quickly before it spread out of the country. So CDC funding is cut in half. what's going to happen? We've reduced surveillance. You're going to see spread of contagious infectious diseases as a result. So the point of all that is when you hear people say, well, DOGE has saved money, identifying inefficiency, but you ask exactly they cut. What inefficiencies are we talking about? Well, it actually turns out that the majority of DOGE cuts were not inefficiency, it was medical research. So I guess if you consider medical research to be wasteful, well, then you can say, well, that's waste. But I don't think medical research is wasteful. Most people don't think medical research is wasteful. The United States has led the world in medical research for decades. All of that is being dismantled. Our status as the premier biomedical research entity in the world, the NIH and the United States as a driver of medical research, is all being taken down, and we will soon no longer be. We're probably not already not the world's leader in medical research anymore. We are taking a significant step back in leadership on medical research. And then finally, I think it's very interesting to point out, and it kind of aligns nicely, Robert F. Kennedy is on a warpath against the most prestigious, elite, respected medical journal in the world, the New England Journal of Medicine, that has been published since the 1700s, is now in the crosshairs by RFK and Trump. And what RFK has said is that, he hasn't followed through on it yet, but what he has said is that he is considering blocking any federal scientist from publishing research in the New England Journal of Medicine. And they're going to create their own medical journals for where government scientists can publish, basically restricting the access that physicians have to where they publish. Let me tell you, in the world of medicine, the New England Journal of Medicine is the premier. It is the top dog. I was told in medical school that if you don't read the New England Journal of Medicine every week, you shouldn't be a doctor. And so when I was a resident, we always made sure we had the latest New England Journal in our pocket, folded in a way that you could see that it was the New England Journal of Medicine, because you never knew when your attending was going to stop you and say, hey, did you read the New England Journal of Medicine this week, cover to cover? What was your best article? What was your favorite article? And they would do that. They would get you right on the spot. I still read the New England Journal of Medicine, and I think it's the best medical journal in the world. For the administration to be attacking the New England Journal of Medicine and Harvard Medical School is really interesting. Massachusetts, Boston, elite, top tier, the best of the best. Trump has something against academia and elite institutions because he's going after them. But it's funny, the Hopkins got 44 more things. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today, is to make it clear that DOGE is not cutting efficiency. Their idea of cutting efficiency is cutting medical research. The government is engaged in a First Amendment constitutional violation, suppress what doctors say. They can't publish without permission at the VA, and they can't publish or won't be able to publish in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is a violation of the Constitution. It's resulting in death worldwide. It will increase infectious diseases around the globe and in the United States, and it represents the dismantling of the United States of America as the world's leading source for high-quality biomedical research. This is a travesty. I can't wait for this administration to come to an end. We have a long way to go, but I'll tell you, I will not fly the American flag until Trump is gone.
Rick, comments.
So I have a tiny bit of good news and a bunch of not great news. Okay. The good news is, if you look at the CDC's COVID wastewater, which is poop water, they look at the sewage and they count the number of COVID particles in the sewage. It's at the lowest it's been in more than a year.
Give it a month.
It's officially very low. The bad news is the CDC has been hanging in there for the first few months of Trump in terms of COVID reporting, but no more. This might be the last week where you can get kind of clean and clear picture by clicking on one link and looking at the whole country. Now they say they're not going to update that anymore.
Right. We won't know.
So the other thing is, even though COVID is very low, not so in Hong Kong, where this new variant is spiking. And so if you look at the national COVID map, the closest state to Hong Kong and the rest of Asia is Hawaii. So you guys are starting to get lit up. And San Francisco, Sacramento area, Northern California also looks a little bit lit up. So it's coming, this latest wave. And so if you live on the West Coast, maybe think about getting, a booster. Another thing is like the CDC website is not super clear, and it's about to get less clear because of Trump and RFK. But it too, they waffle a little bit. They've been buffeted by politics for 20 years. 50 years ago, under President Ford, there's a Michael Lewis book. Michael Lewis wrote The Blind Side, about the football player adopted by a white family. But his last book was called The Premonition, which is the history of how the CDC became kind of skittish because 50 years ago, they came out with the swine flu vaccine because they thought that swine flu was going to sweep the country and make a lot of people sick and dead. Instead, you're always betting and Dr. Patmos can talk about it, that you don't know exactly what's going to happen. They guessed wrong. Swine flu did not turn into a pandemic, and the vaccine made one person in 1,000 sick with a thing I think called Guillain-Barré. And so and the CDC got so much shit for that, what happened, that they became like scaredy cats for the next 50 years.
Yeah. And also, Dr. Patmos, I did some research on the top research universities in the world. The top research university in the world is Harvard University. It's number one by far. But the next 9 of them are all Chinese universities before you get to another U.S. university. And the reason I said that is I want to say congratulations to China, who is listening to this because of Steve Tan, my affiliate or associate in mainland China, through his site called Understanding China, which has about 150,000 viewers. So China is actually positioned to take over as the number one research institutions in the world. They occupy the next 9 slots. So think about that, Doge. Think about that, Elon.
I got one more thing about Harvard. Like the right, the Trump and company like to attack Harvard because, everybody at Harvard is studying Marxism and communism and gender studies and how to be a lesbian. If you actually look at frickin' Harvard, more than half of the students there are majoring in STEM. And
yeah, it's true.
All research is frickin' STEM. It's not ridiculous stuff. I was a STEM major back before they called it that. I'm sure Dr. Patmos was a STEM major. You don't get a lot of politics in a math class, in a physics class, in chemistry. And so attacking Harvard for teaching bullshit is itself bullshit.
Well, those are all great comments, Rick. And I would say you're right. Just a word of caution about the wastewater and COVID. You're right. There is a new variant. And it's important for people to understand, where do these variants come from? Where did this new variant in China, which, oh, by the way, has now been found in the United States, where did it come from? It came from a person with COVID. The virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, doesn't exist out in the environment. It exists in the reservoir. We, human beings, are the reservoir. We are maintaining the virus, replicating it, mutating it, and disseminating it. And it's only a matter of time before some person somewhere coughs up the next new variant that could be milder. It's all a matter of random chance, or it could be much worse. And when you talk about the swine flu and why we panicked in the early 70s, people have to understand what happened during the Spanish influenza epidemic of 1918 to 1920. These numbers are sobering. Between 1918 and 1920, 50 million people around the world, mostly young, healthy men, died of the Spanish flu. That represented about 3% of the Earth's human population at that time. That was a submassive extinction event. 3% of the Earth's human population were wiped out in a 2-year period by a virus just 100 years ago. And you wonder why infection doctors get a little nervous about viruses? Because it's only a matter of time before another virus comes along that we have no treatment for and no vaccine for, capable of killing 30, 40, 50% of people it infects. Submassive extinction events are not far-fetched. And we had one just 100 years ago. So that's why we worry about epidemics and pandemics. And we need a CDC to help us identify, jump on these things and contain them and develop vaccines rapidly to prevent these viruses. The fossil record, paleontologists will tell you, the fossil record is full of evidence of global pandemics, viral pandemics that wiped out species. So we're animals too. We're Homo sapiens. We're primates. We're not immune to these natural biological disasters. We're animals too. But the difference is we have a brain, at least some of us do, and we can use it to mitigate the risk of disease and to produce vaccines and treatments. But right now what's happening is we're being prevented from doing that by a president who is lacking that thing up there.
I just Googled a couple things because you were talking about where do new variants of COVID come from? The human body has, on average, 37 trillion. You're a science lab. Everybody's body is a science lab with 37 trillion cells, which 37 million cells. Now this number I'm not sure of at all, but when you get COVID, maybe 1 billion of those cells get infected. And each one of those cells is a little freaking lab where COVID is reproducing itself, often badly, because viruses are bad at exactly copying themselves. They're like a bad artist who draws just kind of like a really terrible likeness of itself, and then the self fills with these copies and explodes.
You're exactly right. The way the analogy I like to make to help people understand this, because it's astonishing to me how many people don't understand where variants come from. They think they're coming out of they don't know where they come from, but they don't realize it's infected people who produce variants. So each infected person is a factory, a manufacturing plant, manufacturing new virus. Another way to look at it is each infected person is a laptop, a computer that's been infected with a virus. That's where the concept of computer viruses came from. And they're just like a computer can spam out infected email. Or the other analogy I make is every infected person is like a Xerox copier, churning out copies of this document, the virus, and every so often you get the paper jam and you get a weird copy. That's how mutations occur, and that's how variants emerge. It's only a random.
Dr. Patman, just really quickly, because I had a quick question. I know you're running out of time, but you mentioned the USAID and how it has been cut significantly and everything. And I just saw recently that I believe it was one of the countries that had, it might have been China, that had it was Vietnam, that had the 2-child minimum in terms of the amount of children that they would allow and everything, that they have rescinded that. So now people in Vietnam can have more children. And one of the things that we mentioned on one of our news shows was how many of these other societies, whether they're second or third world, don't have basic information about birth control and just kind of like basic care, because there was even some people that I was reading about in India who don't know or understand what's going on with their body when the period is taking place and everything like that. So I was just wondering, is a lot of that going to be even more impacted because of this cut in funding? Because I'm thinking that a lot of the ways that we were helping was helping them get basic knowledge.
You're so right, Mark. That's absolutely correct. I spent several years working at hospitals deep in the barrio in East Los Angeles. I enjoy working in underserved communities. I spent some time, you can't get further deep into the Latino barrio in East LA than where I was. And I saw patients coming from Central America and Mexico who've never had medical care. I mean, you think about that. In the United States, most of us are insured or have access to medical care. Imagine seeing a person who's never had medical care in their entire life. They've never had a vaccination. They've never had any medical care at all. And they managed to get into the United States seeking help. And they're treated at hospitals like East Los Angeles Doctors Hospital, which is a beacon of hope for these people who come in with having never had medical care. Imagine seeing a person at your ER doorstep who's 8 months pregnant, who's never had prenatal care, never had any medical care. So this is heartbreaking. And so when you cut USAID, you're cutting care for other parts of the world, and it's inhumane and unconscionable. I don't know what kind of humanity would think that that's a good idea, but it also directly impacts us, because these people, if they have contagious infectious diseases, which most diseases are, it's going to end up affecting the United States.
But you use the analogy of a factory. You could also say your body is the world's biggest Kinko's. In the old days, if you needed to make a copy, you'd go to Kinko's and they'd have 20 Xerox machines throughout. But your body is when it gets COVID, it's like 1 billion Xerox machines. All of them operated by some idiot who's not really good at making copies. And I just looked it up. When you get COVID, you have 100,000 virus particles per picoliter, which is, I don't know, it's probably a little droplet that's so small you can't even see it. And there's 100,000 pieces of COVID in there.
I think a picoliter is like 1/1000th of a liter. So yes, you're right. Yeah, there's a lot of virus in a tiny little bit of blood. That is true.
And all those viruses are copied badly.
Yes. Now we have a new variant, and we have a very large human host reservoir of people who are available to host. It's kind of like, think about it as like Airbnb. What's the capacity? What do we have? How many hotels do we have where we can host this virus? We've got millions, because most people in the United States are not adequately immunized. So they're a wide open hotel.
Also, one of each variant has its own, typical symptoms. The typical symptom for this one is razor blade throat. Every time you swallow, it feels like you got a razor blade in there. So you may say, well, it's just like a bad cold and I'll be fine. But really, you want razor blade throat.
Nasopharyngitis doesn't give you razor blade throat. The only other thing I know that causes that kind of severe pharyngitis is streptococcal pharyngitis and diphtheria. If you've ever seen diphtheria, the strangling angel of death, that'll catch your attention, watching someone strangled to death with diphtheria. Oh, by the way, that's coming back as well. Thank you, Robert F. Kennedy.
Yeah, it just doesn't sound very good. So some of us are going to be in Spain, where they actually have a greater life expectancy than the United States. And they eat the Mediterranean diet, and the doctors are good. So they don't have crazy people leaving their country. So with that, we do want to thank Dr. Michael Patmos, who's board certified in internal medicine and has specialty in infectious diseases, things that I don't want. Rick Rosner, member of the High IQ Society, and Mark Lee, which you've seen on our show before. And we'll see you next week on Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. Until then, stay healthy and stay away from these infectious diseases. Bye-bye.